Welcome to Reform Thinking. So, imagine you are lying in a hospital bed.
Yeah, just staring up at those sterile ceiling tiles.
Right, and you're in absolute agony. Then your doctor walks in, flips through your chart, maybe checks your vitals for, what, 10
If
minutes?
you're lucky, yeah.
Yeah, and then they just leave the room. And the question we have to ask is, does that doctor actually know what is happening to your soul in that moment?
I mean, probably not, right?
No. So, welcome to a new deep dive. Today, we have materials on the table that they really force us to look directly at the hardest realities of human existence.
We are looking at a clinical appendix written by Dr. R. Havard.
And he was the personal physician to C.S. Lewis, right?
Yeah, he was. And this specific medical note was actually attached to Lewis's famous book, The Problem of Pain.
Which is such a heavy topic. But we are also pairing those clinical observations with a rigorous theological exposition.
Specifically, an exegetical sermon outline on the Apostle Paul's thorn in the flesh.
Right, from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10.
And what we are really trying to do today is bridge this massive gap. We want to take these lofty, abstract ideas about God's sovereignty and, drag them right down into the gritty, unfiltered reality of a sterile hospital room.
Because it's one thing to talk about theology in a classroom.
Oh, absolutely. But we are looking at what physical and mental agony actually does to the human soul.
Moving past academic philosophy into the concrete reality of the sickbed.
Yeah, that's the goal.
So whether you are currently facing a personal trial, or maybe you're caring for a sick family member, or you're simply trying to understand how suffering fits into a universe governed by a good God, this analysis will strip away all those sentimental cliches.
It really does. It offers absolute, hard-hitting truth.
Okay, let's unpack this. We should start with a crucial limitation that Dr. Havard points out right on page 1 of his clinical notes.
Yeah, he establishes what philosophers would call an epistemological boundary.
Which is basically just a limit on what we can actually know from the outside looking in.
Right. He says that while physical pain is obvious and recognizable, a person's character under pain is incredibly difficult to observe accurately.
Because you can use a thermometer to measure a fever, right?
Sure.
And you can use a cuff to get a blood pressure reading. But there is no clinical instrument that measures a person's patience.
No, you can't put a stethoscope to someone's character.
Yeah. Or track the creeping arrival of self-pity in their mind. It just doesn't work that way.
We really need to understand why this boundary matters so much in a medical context, too. The doctor-patient relationship is incredibly transient.
It's totally artificial.
It is. It mostly occurs during acute crises or within artificial containment. A doctor walks into a hospital room for 10 minutes during morning rounds.
They ask a few standard questions, they look at the chart, and they just move on to the next room.
Exactly. And that brief contained interaction, it can completely obscure the actual moral fabric of the individual lying in that bed.
It makes me think of reading about a house fire in a textbook versus actually standing inside the burning building.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, the textbook gives you the raw data. It tells you the ignition point, the burn rate of the materials, the structural integrity of the roof.
Right, all the facts.
But it does not convey the heat blistering your skin, or the blinding smoke, or the sheer suffocating panic in your chest.
And that is what Dr. Howard seems to be warning against.
So if doctors only see the outside behavior, isn't it highly dangerous to make sweeping moral judgments about a patient based on a 10-minute hospital visit?
It is exceptionally dangerous, and Dr. Havard is remarkably honest about this limitation.
Which is refreshing for a medical professional from that era.
Yeah, it really is. This is where speculation and extrapolation require massive humility from any observer.
Whether that is a physician, a pastor, or just a family member visiting.
Think about a quiet patient just staring at the wall. From the doorway, that person might look incredibly courageous.
Right, bearing their trial with silent fortitude.
Or, on the flip side, they might be paralyzed by a stubborn pride that fiercely refuses to ask for help.
Terrified of appearing vulnerable to the nursing staff.
Yeah. We only see tiny fragments of the human response. God sees the whole picture.
So if 10 minutes does not tell the whole story, what happens when you look at conditions that last longer?
Well, since we have established the limits of observation, let us look at the specific physical conditions Dr. Havard did manage to categorize.
He makes a really sharp diagnostic distinction between acute physical pain and long-term chronic suffering.
He does. Let's break down acute pain first.
Okay, so think of a sudden kidney stone, a shattered bone, or a severe burn.
Stuff that sends you straight to the emergency room?
Right. It is overwhelming and absolute. It obliterates all of their thoughts. You cannot focus on your taxes or your grocery list when you're passing a kidney stone.
You're just trying to survive the minute.
But surprisingly, Dr. Havard notes that the patient rarely becomes wild or irrational in those moments.
Which is kind of counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. Instead, they conserve their energy and quietly, desperately beg for relief.
The transient nature of acute distress is the defining feature here.
Because it ends eventually.
Right. The agony is intense, but it has an expiration date. Once the physical cause is resolved, the stone passes, the bone is set, the medication kicks in, the crisis passes with virtually no lasting alteration to the patient's character.
Their soul returns to its baseline.
Yeah. The individual absolutely remembers the agony, but it does not reshape their daily moral choices or their fundamental personality.
It is like a sudden, violent thunderstorm that washes over a landscape.
Oh, I like that analogy.
It is terrifying while the lightning flashes and the wind howls.
Yeah.
You might hide in the basement thinking the roof is going to cave in.
Sure.
But the next day, the sun comes out, the water drains away, and the landscape looks practically identical.
Yeah, the trees are in the exact same place. The house is still standing.
Exactly.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. But then Dr. Havard transitions to the dark reality of chronic pain.
And that is an entirely different beast.
It is a war of attrition against the human will. It is the thunderstorm that parks over your house and never leaves for years.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy.
And chronic pain polarizes people. It forces the soul into one of two corners.
What are the two corners?
Well, some accept it with quiet, heroic resignation. They somehow find a way to exist alongside the agony.
And the others?
Others become querulous, bitter, and they weaponize their suffering to practice domestic tyranny over their families.
Domestic tyranny. That's a strong phrase.
It is. They use their sickbed to manipulate the household, demanding constant attention and making everyone around them miserable.
And there's a fascinating anomaly, he notes, about rheumatoid arthritis patients specifically.
Oh, right. The cheerfulness thing.
Yeah, they often exhibit a persistent cheerfulness. Dr. Havard hypothesizes this might be a mild intoxication of the nervous system from the chronic infection itself.
Which is wild to think about.
It is a sobering biological reality operating behind what looks like moral fortitude. The body is essentially producing a low-grade neurological effect that mimics a cheerful spirit.
So it's not always pure willpower.
Right. But beyond that specific disease, he highlights a third category, which is perhaps the most insidious.
Painless chronic illness.
Yes, long-term illness, completely lacking physical pain.
Think of conditions that simply drain your vitality without causing a sharp, localized ache. This is often an even greater threat to the human spirit.
Why is that?
Because without a localized, painful foe to fight something you can point to and say, that hurts right there, the invalid drifts helplessly into a plaintive, self-pitying despair.
Weariness alone, just a constant dragging fatigue, can thin a person's patience and cloud their judgment far more effectively than a sharp pain.
Absolutely. And we are looking at a transition here, moving from the localized pain of the body to the all-encompassing agony of the mind.
The sources claim that mental pain is infinitely harder to bear and radically more devastating than physical suffering.
What is fascinating here is the fundamental nature of human consciousness.
How do you mean?
Well, physical pain is objective. You can distinguish yourself from the aching tooth or the broken arm.
You say, my knee hurts. You do not say, I am knee pain.
Spot on. You have a localized enemy, but mental pain attacks the ego itself. The center of who you are is under assault.
There is no internal sanctuary to retreat to because the sanctuary is the battlefield.
The mind is trying to flee from its own shadow.
That brings up an intense sociological reality, the burden of social concealment.
Which is huge.
Human society has very clear protocols for a broken leg. People sign your cast, they bring casseroles to your house, they offer you their seat on the bus.
But society has virtually no grace for a broken spirit.
None. It is culturally unacceptable to say, my mind is filled with an absolute crushing dread today, without facing intense stigma.
People back away from you. They don't know what to do with that.
Doesn't this force people dealing with mental anguish to erect a massive mask of normalcy? I mean, effectively doubling their exhaustion?
Absolutely. The effort required to maintain that mask, to smile at work, to make small talk at the grocery store, to pretend everything is fine, it depletes whatever meager emotional resources they have left.
It sounds totally draining.
And if we look at the absolute darkest extremity, detailed in the clinical notes, chronic melancholia and clinical insanity, we find a dark paradox.
What's the paradox?
Many individuals in highly psychotic states are not consciously unhappy in the way we understand it.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Their minds have built massive, impenetrable protective barriers. The brain shatters its own reality to escape the pain.
That's terrifying, but also kind of a built-in defense mechanism.
It is. And Dr. Havard points out that those who recover often emerge with their core personality entirely intact, with almost no memory of the horrific ordeal.
So the mind protected the core self by just deleting the experience.
Yeah.
Taking these clinical medical chart observations and sliding them under a rigorous theological microscope reveals some striking insights.
It really connects the dots.
The sources show how the Westminster Confession, the historic Protestant framework of theology, maps perfectly onto Dr. Havard's clinical notes.
The core thesis here is that pain does not create the soul's condition.
Right.
It acts as a severe diagnostic agent. It shows you what was already there.
Let's look at the doctrine of total depravity through this lens.
Okay, let's do it.
When a patient exploits their chronic illness to tyrannize their family, to make their spouse and children miserable through endless unreasonable demands, this is the clinical manifestation of radical corruption.
Because in everyday life, healthy people have the energy to maintain a polite structure of civil righteousness.
We smile, we say please and thank you, we hold the door for strangers.
But in the furnace of chronic pain, that polite structure is burned away.
The fatigue strips our defenses, exposing the raw selfishness of the fallen human heart, seeking to build a tiny kingdom of self, even on a deathbed.
Okay, let's unpack total depravity for a second. It sounds like a phrase that means everyone is as evil as they could possibly be, like a cartoon villain.
Yeah, people misunderstand that a lot.
But that is not what the framework means, is it?
No, it means every part of human nature, the mind, the will, the emotions, is affected by the fall.
But if human nature is totally corrupted across the board, how do we explain Dr. Havard's specific finding that the heroes of pain are surprisingly numerous, even among non-believers?
That's a great question. People who do not profess any faith often show incredible bravery in the cancer ward.
That reality is explained by the theological doctrine of common grace.
And what does that look like practically?
This is the idea that God restrains the full expression of sin in humanity, preserving remnants of the image of God to keep human society from collapsing into absolute chaos.
So he allows rain to fall on the just and the unjust.
Exactly. He allows secular doctors to discover cures. He gives a natural nobility and courage to people facing death, regardless of their religious affiliation.
This produces immense natural heroism.
But there is a line drawn in the sources between that natural heroism and something else.
Yes. We must clarify the vast gulf between the natural fortitude of a patient relying on their own willpower and the supernatural patience of a true child of God.
Which is wrought exclusively by the Holy Spirit.
Right. Natural fortitude is beautiful, but it lacks saving merit. It is a creaturely courage.
The supernatural endurance we are talking about has a totally different source and a totally different goal.
All of this points to sovereign providence. In this framework, pain is never an accidental intrusion.
It is never a slip of the cosmic pen.
It is an ordained instrument.
For those outside the faith, it exposes creaturely weakness and shatters the illusion that we are in control of our own destiny.
And for the elect, for believers, it is a fatherly, covenantal discipline.
Designed to shatter the illusion of autonomy and drive them to rely on the righteousness of Christ alone.
It is a severe mercy.
We have seen the theology in the abstract. Now let us examine a specific historical case study from the text of Scripture.
Let's look at the Apostle Paul's thorn in the flesh.
From 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10.
The historical context of the Corinthian church is essential to understanding what is happening here.
Right, because first century Corinth was a wealthy, status-obsessed city.
The church there was heavily influenced by this culture. They were proud, they loved elite credentials, and they were captivated by smooth-talking, impressive leaders.
The ones Paul sarcastically calls the super apostles.
Paul is forced to defend his ministry to them. But instead of listing his rabbinical degrees or his flawless track record, he boasts of his shipwrecks, his beatings, and this humiliating thorn.
I want to pause here because I have heard people preach that Paul's thorn was just a minor annoyance.
Oh yeah, like bad eyesight.
Or maybe just a difficult person in his life who kept bothering him.
But looking at the exegetical dig in our sources, the original Greek terms paint a totally different picture. What do those words actually mean?
The Greek word Paul uses for thorn is skolops.
Skolops, okay.
This does not mean a minor splinter you get from gardening. In classical and biblical Greek, it means a sharp, agonizing impalement stake.
Wow, an impalement stake.
It is the kind of stake used to pitch a massive tent, or even a stake used for torture.
That is graphic.
And the verb he uses to describe what this thorn is doing to him is kolaphiza.
What does that translate to?
That is a bare-knuckle boxing term. It means to strike repeatedly with a closed fist.
So it's an active beating.
He is describing a continuous, violent, physical, or deeply physiological beating that is humiliating him.
So he is dealing with an impalement stake that feels like a repeated punch to the face.
Yeah.
The theological shocker here is the paradox of sovereignty surrounding this thorn.
Because the text clearly says this thorn was a messenger of Satan.
Its intended design by the enemy was to destroy Paul, to make him quit the ministry.
Yet, the very same text reveals it was sovereignly commissioned by God for the explicit purpose of keeping Paul humble.
Right after he received massive heavenly visions.
Satan is shown to be a chained dog. His vicious bites are completely overruled by God to accomplish the eternal good of God's servant.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this text vigorously dismantles the health and wealth prosperity gospel that is so prevalent today.
Wait, how does this square with modern prosperity teachings that promise perfect health to anyone with enough faith?
You hear this all the time on television.
Mm-hmm.
If you just pray hard enough, if you just believe enough, God wants you wealthy and totally pain-free right now.
It completely shatters that teaching. Think about the Apostle Paul. He had incredible faith.
He raised the dead.
He planted churches across the known world. He wrote half the New Testament.
And he prayed 3 times, begging God for deliverance from this impalement stake.
And God's answer to this giant of the faith was a definitive no.
The prosperity gospel cannot handle 2 Corinthians 12.
It seems like this text also forces us to address other theological views of suffering.
Yes, this text forces a rejection of Arminianism in the context of suffering.
Okay, let's translate Arminianism for a second. In this specific context, you are referring to the idea that God wants to stop the pain, he is weeping over the pain, but he somehow cannot intervene.
Because he refuses to violate natural laws or human free will.
God is essentially a helpless bystander.
Correct. The text explicitly refutes that. God is not a weeping bystander. God ordained the thorn.
He gave it to Paul for a specific sanctifying purpose.
Furthermore, we must reject the Roman Catholic concept of merit-making through suffering.
Meaning pain does not pay for sins.
Your suffering does not balance the cosmic scales or earn you righteousness. Christ's blood alone did that.
Paul's pain was not paying for his sins, it was keeping him humble.
And the settled decree from Christ to Paul is this famous phrase, "My grace is sufficient for you."
The sermon outline we are analyzing makes a massive point about the grammar here.
That phrase is written in the present active indicative in the original language.
Which means it is a continuous, absolute sufficiency right in the middle of the impalement.
The grace does not arrive after the trial is over to help you recover. It actively sustains you while the stake is still in your flesh.
That is the crux of the entire passage. Paul's thorn naturally points us to a much greater crown of thorns.
The ultimate demonstration of strength made perfect in weakness is found at Calvary.
When we look at the cross, we see Christ entering the absolute fullness of both somatic, bodily agony and psychological heartbreak.
He experienced the brutal physiological reality of Roman crucifixion.
The asphyxiation, the torn nerves.
And he experienced the mental horror of Gethsemane, sweating drops of blood.
Crying out in the language of Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
We have to point out a crucial theological distinction here. Christ's suffering was not a display of stoic heroism, to give us a good example.
It was substitutionary.
He stood in the place of his people. He absorbed the unmitigated wrath of God against sin.
He took the penalty so that the believer never has to face the wrath of God in their own suffering.
This completely alters how a believer views their own trials.
When a Christian is in the hospital ward, their endurance is not a stoic flexing of muscles.
They are not gritting their teeth and saying, "Look how brave I am. Look how much pain I can take."
It is a cruciform endurance.
It is a posture that says, "I am entirely weak, I am broken, but Christ is sufficient in my weakness."
Taking the cosmic reality of the cross and bringing it down to the immediate practical steps for daily life is vital.
Our sources draw out specific, actionable applications from this text for different groups of people. Let's start with the sufferer.
If you are the one lying in the bed right now dealing with chronic pain or mental anguish, you have full biblical permission to lament.
Read the Psalms. Do not hide your pain behind a mask of false cheerfulness.
Bring your heartbreak, your confusion, and your tears to God without disguise. He can handle your honesty.
But at the same time, the text warns us. Do not let your pain become an excuse for bitterness or a wounding tongue against the people trying to help you.
Then there is an application for the caregivers and the family members. A home can be radically reordered by chronic pain.
Everything shifts to accommodate the sick room.
Families must bear burdens, they must show immense grace, but they must also set boundaries.
Love does not mean allowing sin or domestic tyranny to rule the home.
A sick person can still be a selfish person, and true care sometimes means gently refusing to be manipulated by someone's illness.
And to the observers, the comfortable, healthy listeners who might just be visiting the hospital room, do not judge suffering hastily.
Avoid the cruelty of Job's friends.
Who sat around trying to figure out what secret sin Job committed to deserve his sickness.
Do not preach a subtle prosperity gospel by demanding that sick people always display emotional brightness.
Do not walk into a hospital room and tell someone they just need to smile and claim their healing. That is cruel.
Finally, there is a word to the church as a whole. The church must be a house of truth, not a stage for religious performance.
People should not feel forced to pretend their lives are perfect when they walk through the doors on Sunday morning.
It must be a community of holy endurance that sings psalms in the dark nights.
Brings meals to the hurting without asking for anything in return, and waits together for the final resurrection of the body.
To briefly recap the massive scope of this deep dive, we started by looking at the strict limits of a doctor's chart in a 10-minute hospital visit.
We move through the agonizing taxonomy of physical acute pain, the war of attrition and chronic illness, and the devastating, ego-crushing reality of mental afflictions.
We took all of those clinical notes straight into the theological furnace of total depravity and sovereign grace, unpacking how God uses pain to expose our hearts.
And finally, we saw all of this culminate in the scarred hands of Christ and the substitutionary work of the cross.
We have covered an immense amount of ground.
We really have, connecting the clinical, sterile observations of the sick room directly to the eternal, sovereign decrees of God.
We have seen how the darkest rooms on earth are still under the sovereign gaze of a good God.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We spend so much of our lives trying to escape discomfort, trying to pray away every splinter and every stake.
But consider the Apostle Paul.
What if the very weakness you are desperately begging God to remove right now is actually the precise canvas He has chosen to display His greatest strength in your life?
What if the thorn is not the obstacle stopping you from reaching your calling, but the very instrument preparing you to actually fulfill it?
Thank you for joining this deep dive.